The closing of Earth's gates. The stars shimmered in the endless blackness of space. To anyone watching from Earth, it looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. But something far darker was happening, far beyond the view of any telescope. The Earth was about to face a threat unlike anything it had ever seen. Inside Earth's massive space command center, the brightest minds of humanity were gathered in a war room. The walls were lined with screens, each showing different parts of Earth's space defenses. The room was filled with a tense silence, the kind that only comes before a storm. Earth had received a strange, encrypted signal from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a signal that seemed to come from a time long past. The scientists and generals worked feverishly to decode the message, but the results only raised more questions. The signal was a distress call. It came from the Galactic Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy. However, the message was not a simple call for help. It was a warning. The message told of Earth's impending doom and promised that no one would be able to stop the invasion. It was clear. The Empire had set its sights on Earth. But the most shocking part of the signal was something that no one could understand. It was a set of coordinates that pointed directly to Earth, and with it, the chilling phrase, "The gates will close. War is coming." At first, no one understood what it meant. What were the gates? Why would the Empire close them? The commanders and politicians in the room were puzzled. No one knew exactly how to respond. Should Earth prepare for an attack? Should they try to open communication with the Empire? Should they panic? Then, as if on cue, a sudden alert flashed across the screens. Emergency! Earth's gates are closing. The room erupted into chaos. The term gates had been used before, but no one had truly understood it until now. It wasn't just a metaphor. Earth's gates were actual portals that allowed ships to travel to and from Earth's orbit. They were powerful, high-tech systems, like invisible walls protecting Earth from outside dangers. They had been built centuries ago as a precaution against invasions. No one had ever thought they would need to use them, until now. Without warning, the gates to Earth's orbit began to shut. Large, invisible barriers were slowly being raised around Earth, locking it off from the rest of the galaxy. Ships that tried to pass through the gates were stopped, their engines sputtering out. Communication signals were cut off. Earth was being isolated from everything beyond. "What's happening?" shouted General Walker, his voice shaking. He was a seasoned military officer, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. He watched in disbelief as the last of the ships in orbit, including cargo and supply ships, were trapped outside the gates. A commander rushed to the control panel, furiously typing commands to try to override the gate locking mechanism. But nothing worked. The system was secure, and all of Earth's space defenses went silent. The gates were closing and Earth was being locked away from the rest of the universe. Meanwhile, high above Earth, in deep space, the Empire's fleet was advancing. Ships of all sizes were moving swiftly, their destination clear, Earth. Back on the surface, in Earth's capital city, panic began to spread. People had no idea what was happening. No one understood why the gates were closing or why Earth was suddenly cut off. Rumors spread like wildfire, and soon, fear gripped the population. What was coming? Was the Earth under attack? And who would save them? In the command center, the urgency was growing. Earth's leaders knew they had to act quickly. Time was running out. "Get me the Deathworlders," said President Carter, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of the situation. The Deathworlders were a mysterious race of warriors, feared and respected across the galaxy. They were known for their incredible strength and battle skills, but also for their tendency to stay out of galactic politics. Earth had never been in direct contact with them. But if the Empire's fleet was coming, there was only one hope left. The Deathworlders might be able to help. The President's order was passed along to the highest military officers, who immediately sent a signal to the Deathworlders. Earth's fate now rested on whether they would come to their aid. Back in the command center, the pressure was mounting. Military personnel were scrambling to assess Earth's remaining defenses. They could not stop the closing of the gates. The enemy fleet was getting closer. The gates would be completely sealed within hours. The closing of Earth's gates was not just a physical barrier. It was a message. The Galactic Empire had spoken. Earth was now isolated, a target of war. As the hours passed, Earth's future became more uncertain. The closing gates were a symbol of something terrible, an impending war with the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The only hope now rested on the Dithworlders, a wild card that no one fully understood. Would they answer Earth's call? Or would Earth stand alone against the coming storm? The Empire's secrets. The lights in Earth's command center flickered as the news of the gates closing spread across the globe. Panic and confusion were starting to build on the surface, but deep in the heart of the command room, the leaders of Earth were trying to make sense of the situation. The gates were sealed, communication was cut off, and the Galactic Empire was on its way. But there was something about the Empire's approach that didn't add up. General Walker paced back and forth in front of the holographic map, his mind racing. "There's something we're missing," he muttered, eyes scanning the images of the Empire's fleet. The Empire's ships were massive, unlike anything Earth had ever seen, yet they were approaching with precision. It didn't seem like an invasion. It seemed like a coordinated move, a well-thought-out plan. Suddenly, an officer turned to face the general. "Sir, we've decrypted part of the message from the Empire's fleet. There's more to it than we thought." The signal wasn't just a distress call. It was a warning. The room fell silent. A warning from an invading force. The officer continued, "It says that Earth's existence is in danger. But not just from them. There's something else, something pulling the strings. They called it the Void, a force that has been controlling the Empire from the shadows." General Walker narrowed his eyes. The Void. He had never heard of it before. It was a name that seemed to carry weight, a name that suggested something ancient and powerful. "Tell me more." The officer hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. "The Empire, it's not acting on its own. There is a faction, something more dangerous, behind the Empire's actions. They have manipulated the Empire for centuries. The Emperor's decisions, the attacks, they have all been guided by this force. And now they're coming for Earth." The room was filled with an uneasy silence. The idea that Earth's attackers were not acting independently was unsettling. The Empire was already the most powerful force in the galaxy. To think that something more dangerous was controlling them from the shadows was a terrifying thought. "Could this be why the gates are closing?" asked President Carter, his voice tense. "Are they trying to protect us from this void?" "I don't know," General Walker replied. "But it seems that the Empire's mission here isn't just conquest. They're trying to neutralize something, and Earth might be caught in the middle of it." A young officer entered the room, interrupting the conversation. "Sir, we've received an unexpected transmission from the Dithworlders. They've agreed to meet with us." The room buzzed with anticipation. The Dithworlders, the very same warriors that had sent shivers down the spines of every galactic leader. They were known for their brutal strength and deadly skills in combat. If anyone could help Earth in this fight, it was them. General Walker turned to face the officer. "Prepare the meeting. Now." The urgency in his voice was clear. The Dithworlders' arrival could change everything. But as they prepared for this meeting, another, more troubling thought crossed Walker's mind. If the Empire was being controlled by an unknown force, what if the Dithworlders knew something about this void that they weren't telling? Hours later, a transmission crackled through the command center speakers. The voice on the other end was harsh, grating, yet strangely familiar. It was the leader of the Dithworlders, a massive figure known only as Drekor. His race was a mystery to the rest of the galaxy, and though they were feared, no one really knew what drove them. But now, Earth was desperate. "You humans are strange," Drekor's voice boomed. "You panic. You shut yourselves off from the universe. and you think you can handle the coming storm on your own. Pathetic. President Carter stepped forward, his hands clenched. We need your help. The Empire is on its way, and there's something much worse behind them. If you don't assist us, Earth will be destroyed. Drecker's laugh was low and menacing. You think you can stop the Empire's tide with your pathetic defenses. You have no idea what's coming. But I'll tell you this, Earth will fall, unless you understand what's really happening. He paused, as if waiting for the weight of his words to sink in. The Void has been manipulating the Empire for centuries. It is not some ancient enemy, nor a race. The Void is a force, an endless hunger that devours worlds. And it is the reason the Empire has come to Earth. The room grew colder as the weight of Drecker's words settled on everyone present. The Void, a force that wasn't just a galactic empire or an invading army. It was something far darker, a force that didn't just seek to conquer, it consumed. We will assist you, but not because we like your kind, Drecker continued. We have no love for the Empire, but we have our own reasons for stopping the Void. If Earth is consumed, so will our worlds. We fight for our own survival. The conversation ended abruptly, and the room was filled with a sense of foreboding. The Deathworlders were coming to Earth, but their motivations were unclear. They were willing to fight, but their alliance was fragile. And in the back of everyone's mind was the same thought. Could they trust them? As Earth's gates remained sealed and the Empire drew closer, Earth's leaders were left with more questions than answers. The true nature of the threat was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. The gates were not just closing to protect Earth. They were closing because something worse than the Empire was coming for them. The first strike. The tension in Earth's command center was palpable. It had been days since the gates closed, and the reality of their situation was starting to sink in. Earth was isolated. Its defenses were in shambles, and the Empire's fleet was now on the edge of Earth's atmosphere. The Deathworlders had arrived, their powerful ships docking at Earth's military bases, but they were cryptic, keeping their distance. The meeting with Drecker had provided little comfort, only more uncertainty. General Walker stood at the front of the command room, staring at the massive screen that displayed the approaching Empire fleet. The moment had come. War was no longer a distant possibility. It was a harsh, inescapable reality. And Earth was at the center of it. We need to act now, Walker said firmly, turning toward President Carter. His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable urgency in his eyes. If we wait much longer, we won't have a chance to mount any sort of defense. The Empire's fleet is getting closer by the hour. President Carter nodded gravely. Prepare the fleet. We have to hold them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive, if they come. I don't want to lose Earth without a fight. As the military scrambled to prepare Earth's defenses, the air was thick with anticipation. The gates were still closed, preventing any ships from entering or leaving. Earth's fleet was small compared to the Empire's, but Earth's forces had a secret advantage. The Deathworlders. Their technology and combat skills were like nothing humanity had ever seen. If Earth had any hope of surviving, it rested on the Deathworlders' strength. It wasn't long before the first signs of the Empire's fleet were visible. A massive warship appeared on the edge of Earth's orbit, its dark silhouette looming over the planet. It was the flagship of the Empire, a beast of war built for annihilation. And it wasn't alone. Hundreds of smaller ships followed, forming a crescent-shaped formation that completely encircled Earth. The Empire had come prepared. General, the enemy fleet is now in range, reported one of the officers. We're outnumbered 10-1. We can't hold them off for long. General Walker didn't flinch. We fight to the last man. Send out the Deathworlders. The order was given, and the Deathworlders' fleet sprang into action. Their ships, sleek and powerful, darted out of the atmosphere like streaks of lightning, leaving Earth's defenders in awe. The Deathworlders' vessels moved with a speed and grace that Earth's ships couldn't match, their weapons flashing as they prepared to engage the Empire. It wasn't long before the first volley of fire lit up the sky. Explosions rippled across the expanse of space as both sides clashed. The Empire's fleet unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy blasts, but the Deathworlders' ships were quick, dodging and weaving through the chaos like predators on the hunt. Their weapons fired back with precision, cutting down Empire ships with brutal force. The battle had begun. Back in Earth's command center, everyone was watching the events unfold with bated breath. The images on the screens were a blur of fire and destruction. The Deathworlders' tactics were unlike anything Earth had ever seen. They fought with an unrelenting aggression that seemed almost primal. Their ships moved as one, coordinating their attacks to maximize damage and disrupt the Empire's formation. Earth's forces, inspired by the Deathworlders' raw power, fought fiercely alongside them. But the Empire was not so easily defeated. Despite the Deathworlders' onslaught, the Empire's fleet was massive, and it wasn't backing down. Waves of Imperial fighters launched from the flagship, swarming around Earth's defenders like a cloud of locusts. Earth's military, though brave, was outclassed and outmatched. Each explosion from the Empire's ships sent shockwaves through the space around Earth, rattling the defenses. General Walker watched in grim silence as the battle raged on. "We're losing ground," he muttered, his voice barely audible above the chaos. The Empire's ships were too powerful, too numerous. The Deathworlders were holding their own, but even their strength was being tested by the Empire's relentless assault. "Report from the front lines, sir," a voice called out. "The Deathworlders have taken heavy losses. Their fleet is in retreat." Walker's heart sank. The Deathworlders were the last line of defense. If they fell back, Earth would have no chance. He turned to President Carter, who was standing in the corner, his face pale. The hope they had placed in the Deathworlders was quickly fading. "I won't accept this," Carter said, his voice firm but strained. "We can't lose. We can't let the Empire take Earth." Just as the situation seemed dire, a sudden shift occurred. From the depths of the battle, the Deathworlders made a surprising move. The ships that had been retreating suddenly turned, their engines blazing as they charged back into the fray with renewed fury. It was then that Earth's forces saw what they had been waiting for, the Deathworlders' secret weapon. In the heart of the battle, a massive explosion erupted, sending ripples of light and energy throughout space. A new weapon, something Earth's commanders had never seen before, was unleashed. It was a pulse of raw energy, devastating in its power, and it cut through the Empire's fleet like a hot knife through butter. The Empire's ships that were hit by the blast disintegrated into fiery debris, leaving nothing but a trail of destruction in their wake. The tide of the battle had turned, but it was only a temporary victory. The Empire's forces were vast, and they wouldn't give up easily. As the Deathworlders pushed forward, another problem emerged. From the shadows of the Imperial fleet, a new ship appeared, larger, more powerful, and radiating an ominous energy. It was the Empire's true weapon, a ship unlike any other. The battle was far from over, and Earth's fate was still uncertain. The first strike had been devastating, but what was coming next would decide everything. The Empire's true power. The skies above Earth were ablaze with explosions, the remnants of shattered ships drifting through space. The battle had raged for hours, and the outcome was still uncertain. The Deathworlders, though fearsome in combat, were struggling against the might of the Empire. Despite their advanced technology and brutal combat strategies, they were slowly being pushed back. And now, the true force of the Empire's power had made its entrance. General Walker stood in the command center, his eyes locked on the large screen that displayed the ongoing conflict. The Deathworlders had made significant progress, but they were starting to take heavy casualties. Their ships were moving slower, their movements more erratic, and their numbers were dwindling. "General, we've lost contact with the Deathworlders' fleet," an officer reported, his voice filled with concern. "Their ships are retreating back toward Earth, but they're badly damaged. We can't keep up the defense much longer. Walker clenched his fists. We can't let them retreat. We need them in the fight. If we lose them, we lose everything. Before Walker could say more, the room was suddenly filled with static as the communication line crackled to life. A distorted voice came through the speakers, weak but unmistakable. "This is Drekor," the voice said. "We cannot continue the fight. The Empire has revealed its true power." The room fell silent, everyone straining to hear Drekor's words. "General, President Carter," Drekor continued, "the Empire's flagship is not just a warship. It's a weapon. A weapon unlike anything you've ever seen. We have made a grave mistake. We have underestimated their strength." The room erupted into chaos. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. Earth had been fighting the Empire's fleet, but the true threat was something far worse, something they hadn't even begun to prepare for. "Tell us what it is, Drekor," General Walker demanded, his voice firm despite the growing panic. "What kind of weapon are we facing?" Drekor's voice crackled again, but his response was chilling. "It's not just a ship. It's a living weapon, a creation of the void. The Empire has harnessed the power of the void itself. This weapon is capable of wiping out entire planets, entire systems, with a single strike. Its energy is drawn from the void, and it grows stronger with each attack." A cold shiver ran down Walker's spine. A living weapon, a weapon powered by the void. Earth's worst nightmare had just come to life. "We cannot stop it," Drekor said, his voice filled with despair. "The weapon is invincible. We don't have the firepower to defeat it. We will have to retreat. Earth's fate is sealed." President Carter stood at the front of the room, his expression one of disbelief and fear. "We can't just give up. We have to find a way to stop this weapon." General Walker turned to Carter, his face grim. "There's nothing more we can do. The Empire's weapon is unstoppable. We need a new plan." Before they could speak further, the room was filled with another transmission. This time, it was from Earth's military fleet. "General," the officer said urgently, "we've detected a massive energy surge. It's coming from the Empire's flagship." The screen displayed a massive pulse of energy, growing exponentially, until it consumed everything in its path. The entire fleet, including the Deathworlders, was struggling to avoid the overwhelming force of the weapon. Ships exploded one after another, their hulls crumpling under the raw power of the attack. The pulse shot out again, this time aimed directly at Earth. "Everyone, brace yourselves," an officer shouted. "The weapon is targeting Earth." Panic swept through the room as Earth's fate seemed sealed. The energy pulse grew larger, its glow blinding, and the sheer force of it was like a thunderstorm in space. The Empire's weapon was charging for its final blow. In that moment, Drekor's voice crackled through the speakers once more. "General, President Carter, there is one last hope. The void is not just a force, it is a place where the rules of reality do not apply. The Empire's weapon draws its power from there, but there is a way to stop it. We know the secret, but it will require everything you have." "Tell us," General Walker demanded, his voice sharp. "We have no time left." Drekor hesitated for a moment before responding. "You must open the gates. Let the void come to Earth." The room fell silent, the suggestion hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Open the gates. Let the void come to Earth. It sounded like madness, but in the face of certain destruction, there seemed to be no other choice. "How can we trust you?" President Carter's voice trembled. "How do we know this will work?" "We don't have a choice," Drekor responded, his voice calm despite the urgency. "If you don't open the gates, the void will destroy everything. The weapon will tear Earth apart. But if you open the gates, we can trap the void here, bind it to Earth, where it can never leave. The Empire will lose its power, and Earth will survive." It was a dangerous gamble. To open the gates meant to invite the void itself to Earth. The destruction could be unimaginable. but if it was the only way to stop the Empire's weapon. "Do it," General Walker said firmly. "We have no other choice." With that, the command was given. The gates that had sealed Earth off from the rest of the galaxy began to pulse, their energy levels rising. The air was thick with anticipation as the impossible choice was made. As the gates slowly began to open, Earth's people held their breath. The fate of the planet was now in the hands of those who had the courage to make a choice that no one could predict. The void unleashed. As the gates slowly opened, a strange hum filled the air, vibrating through the entire command center. The room grew eerily quiet, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Earth's fate now rested on an act that defied all logic. The mysterious energy of the void, a force no one fully understood, was about to be unleashed. No one knew what would happen when the gates opened completely. Would it destroy Earth, or would it stop the Empire's weapon as Drekor had promised? General Walker stood motionless, watching the screen as the gates pulsed brighter, their energy field expanding outward. Every officer in the room held their breath, waiting for the inevitable. "General, the Empire's weapon is still charging," an officer called out, his voice shaky. "It's almost ready to fire again. If we don't stop it now—" "I know," Walker interrupted, his voice low but firm. He turned to the president, who stood beside him, his face tense with uncertainty. "Mr. President, there's no turning back now," Walker said. "We either open the gates and risk everything, or we wait for the Empire to destroy us." President Carter's face was pale, but there was resolve in his eyes. "Open them. Do it." With the command given, the energy of the gates surged. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the command center, until it felt as though the very fabric of space and time was stretching. The gates were fully open now, and an unnatural darkness seemed to pour through. It was as if the very stars themselves dimmed in the presence of the void. "General, the weapon is firing," an officer shouted in panic. On the screen, the Empire's flagship fired once again, a beam of pure energy ripping through space, heading straight for Earth. The pulse of energy moved at unimaginable speeds, and it seemed unstoppable. But then something strange happened. As the pulse neared Earth, it slowed, its trajectory wavering. The light around it distorted as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched. The darkness of the void, pouring through the gates, seemed to wrap itself around the weapon's beam, twisting it, bending it. "Is it working?" President Carter whispered, unable to tear his eyes away from the screen. The beam of energy suddenly shattered, fracturing into multiple smaller bolts of light that veered off in different directions, crashing harmlessly into space. Earth was safe for now, but the victory was fleeting. The energy from the void didn't just stop the weapon, it seemed to be consuming it, absorbing its power. The beam of light was gone, but in its place, the Empire's flagship began to flicker, its energy source fluctuating violently. "It's destabilizing," Walker said, his voice filled with awe. "The void is feeding on it. The weapon, it's losing power." The command center erupted in a mixture of disbelief and hope. Earth had done it. They had stopped the Empire's weapon, at least for the moment. But the battle was far from over. The Empire's fleet was still in orbit, and now Earth had to face the consequences of unleashing the void. No one knew what it would do next, or what the full cost of this gamble would be. But as the moments passed, the true danger of the situation began to unfold. The Empire's flagship, now flickering like a dying star, began to tremble. A strange, low-frequency hum emanated from the ship, vibrating through the entire command center. It was as though the ship itself was alive, and in the grip of something far more powerful than anything the Empire had ever controlled. Suddenly, the ship's hull split open, as if the void itself had reached inside and torn it apart. The destruction was swift and violent. The once mighty warship crumpled like paper, its massive frame collapsing in on itself, releasing an explosion of dark energy. But even as the ship was destroyed, Its pieces vanished into the void, swallowed by the endless darkness. "General, what's happening?" an officer asked. But even as Earth's forces watched in stunned silence, another shift occurred. From the center of the Empire's fleet, a new, even darker energy pulsed outward. The remaining ships that hadn't been consumed by the void began to glow with an eerie light, their shields flickering to life. "We're not done yet," President Carter muttered, his face tightening. "The Empire still has power. There's something left, something worse." And he was right. In the center of the fleet, a massive figure emerged, a colossal warship unlike any Earth had ever seen. It was blacker than the void itself, a shadow in space, its size dwarfing all the ships around it. The energy emanating from the ship was overwhelming, a dark pulse that made the void seem like a faint whisper. "That ship, it's a flagship like no other," Walker whispered in awe and fear. "It's the last card the Empire has to play." The entire battlefield fell silent as the dark warship powered up. A beam of pure dark energy shot from its core, piercing through space with terrifying speed. The Empire had one last weapon left, and it was stronger than anything Earth had faced before. The Empire's last gambit. The massive warship, dark and menacing, loomed before the remains of the Empire's fleet. It was a presence unlike anything Earth had seen before. Its energy radiated a dark power that seemed to suck the very light from the stars. The entire battlefield was now engulfed in the eerie, pulsating glow of the colossal ship, which seemed to hover in space like a predator waiting to strike. General Walker stood rigid, his eyes locked onto the screen, unable to look away from the terrifying sight. He had never seen anything like this. The Deathworlders, despite their strength, had no way to prepare for an enemy like this. Earth's forces had been battered, their fleet torn apart. And now, the final weapon of the Empire was about to make its move. "We've lost contact with the Deathworlder fleet," an officer reported, fear lacing his voice. "They're scattered and retreating. They're not coming back." Walker's heart sank. The Deathworlders, Earth's last hope, had been devastated by the Empire's weapon. And now, Earth stood alone, facing an enemy more powerful than any of them had ever imagined. On the screen, the dark warship's core pulsed with energy. And then, without warning, a beam of pure darkness shot out. The energy seemed to distort space itself as it made its way toward Earth. There was no time to react, no way to escape its reach. "General, it's coming straight for us," an officer shouted, his voice panicked. "We have no way to stop it." The entire command center fell into chaos as Earth's defenses scrambled to respond. Missiles were launched, shields were activated, but it was clear this was something beyond their capabilities. The dark energy beam moved at a blinding speed, closing the distance between the Empire's warship and Earth in mere moments. "Brace for impact," Walker shouted, his voice filled with urgency. The massive energy beam struck Earth's atmosphere with a deafening roar. The impact sent shockwaves across the planet, rattling every city, every building. The ground trembled and the skies darkened, as though the very planet itself was protesting the attack. But despite the intense power of the beam, Earth's defenses held strong for just a moment longer. It wasn't enough. The shields flickered and cracked, unable to withstand the sheer force of the Empire's weapon. The energy from the beam surged through, tearing apart Earth's outer defenses in an instant. The ground shook with such intensity that the very air seemed to tremble. And then, with a final, earth-shattering blast, the beam struck directly at the heart of Earth. In that instant, it felt as though time itself slowed. The force of the impact pushed everything back, forcing even those in the command center to stagger and fall. On the screen, the Earth's atmosphere began to rupture, the energy beam cutting through like a blade through soft flesh. "We've lost the shields," an officer gasped, panic in his voice. "The planet's core is exposed. The weapon, it's going to destroy us." Walker's heart pounded in his chest, The Empire's weapon had torn through their defenses. Earth had been struck at its core, and there was no coming back from this. But then, just as all hope seemed lost, something extraordinary happened. From the depths of the void, a massive surge of energy rippled outward. The gates, the ones that had opened earlier, began to pulse once again. The energy from the void, once a mere trickle, now flooded the entire battlefield. It was as though the gates were responding to the Empire's final attack, the void itself moving to protect Earth from total destruction. "What's happening?" President Carter asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "The void," Walker whispered, his eyes wide with realization. "It's fighting back." The dark warship from the Empire, still hovering in space, seemed to recoil. Its energy beam wavered, weakening, its trajectory shifting as the void surged in opposition. The dark energy that had seemed so powerful just moments before now began to falter, as though it had met a force stronger than itself. On the battlefield, the remaining Empire ships tried to regroup, but their attempts were futile. The power of the void, once unleashed, could not be stopped. The energy that was flowing from the gates seemed to reach out, extending like tendrils into space, swallowing the Empire's ships one by one. Their shields crackled and shattered, their hulls buckled under the pressure, and the once mighty fleet began to disintegrate, pulled into the void. General Walker watched in stunned silence as the enemy's forces crumbled. The Empire's ships were being torn apart, their power consumed by the darkness. It was as if the void had come alive, awakening to protect Earth from its aggressors. Then, without warning, the massive warship, the flagship of the Empire, exploded in a blinding flash of dark energy. The shockwave from the explosion rippled outward, and the remaining ships of the Empire were scattered like leaves in the wind. We won," an officer whispered, disbelief written all over his face. Walker stood motionless, his mind trying to process what had just happened. The void had responded to Earth's desperate need, but at what cost? What had the gates truly unleashed upon the universe? And what would be the long-term consequences for Earth? "General," an officer said, pulling Walker from his thoughts, "we've won the battle, but we're not sure what the void's influence will do to Earth. The gates, they're still open." Walker's face hardened. The battle might be over, but the war was far from won. The void had protected Earth from the Empire, but the cost was unknown. And as long as the gates remained open, the danger wasn't over. "Prepare for everything," Walker said grimly. "The Empire may be gone, but Earth's fight has just begun. The aftermath and the unknown." The battle had ended, and Earth was standing in the aftermath of its greatest war. The Empire, once thought to be invincible, was no more. Its ships were destroyed, its fleets scattered, and its dark warship consumed by the void itself. Yet despite this victory, the tension in the air was palpable, and fear lingered over Earth like a dark cloud. General Walker stood at the command center, staring at the planet below on the large screen. The Earth was intact, for now, but the gates to the void remained open. The energy from the gates still pulsed, swirling in the atmosphere, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The very air felt heavy with the unknown. "We've won the battle," President Carter said, his voice filled with relief but tinged with uncertainty. "But at what cost? The void, it's still here. We don't know what we've unleashed." Walker nodded grimly, his eyes never leaving the screen. "I've seen the power of the void firsthand. It's more than a weapon. It's a force of nature. We don't know how long it will stay with us, or what it will do next." The officers in the command center exchanged worried glances, but no one spoke. They all knew the truth. Earth had survived this war, but the future was uncertain. The void was now a part of their world, and no one knew whether it would destroy them or offer them new possibilities. "We've lost contact with the Deathworlder fleet," an officer said quietly. "They've gone silent, and there's no way to reach them." Walker's heart sank. The Deathworlders, the only allies who had helped Earth in this fight, were gone. Had the void consumed them as well? Or was their silence a sign of something more? There were too many unknowns, too many unanswered questions. Suddenly, the room's lights flickered, and the hum of energy from the gates grew louder, more intense. Everyone turned to look at the screen, where the swirling mass of energy was beginning to shift. "General, what's happening?" one of the officers asked, panic creeping into her voice. Walker's eyes narrowed. The energy from the void was fluctuating, growing stronger with each passing moment. It was as though the gates were feeding, drawing power from some unknown source, and that power was now turning back onto Earth. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them shook. The entire command center trembled, as if the Earth itself was being torn apart. A wave of dark energy surged through the room, and the lights flickered once more. The officers stumbled, trying to maintain their footing, but the shaking was growing worse by the second. "What's going on?" President Carter demanded, his voice rising in panic. "It's the void," Walker said, his voice tense. "It's reacting. We don't know how to stop it." The energy from the gates seemed to pulse more violently, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. The sky outside turned dark, as if the very light of the sun was being devoured by the void. And then something happened that no one could have predicted. A massive surge of energy shot from the gates, blasting upward into the sky with such force that it ripped through the atmosphere. The shockwave traveled outward, pushing against the surface of the planet. The entire world trembled as if it was being shaken by an invisible hand. The energy from the void reached out like tendrils, wrapping around Earth, pulling at its core. "What is it doing?" an officer shouted in disbelief. "It's trying to pull the Earth into the void," Walker said, his voice heavy with realization. "The gates, they're not just opening to another world. They're opening a path for the void to consume everything." The lights in the command center flickered again as the ground continued to quake. The tension was unbearable, and everyone knew the truth now. Earth had only survived the battle because the void had chosen to protect them, but that protection came with a terrible price. The gates were still open, and the void was slowly, inevitably, pulling the planet into its grasp. "We need to close the gates," Walker ordered urgently. "Now, before it's too late." The officers scrambled, desperately trying to figure out how to close the gates, but they had no idea how to control the void, no understanding of its true power. The force from the gates was too overwhelming, too unpredictable. And then, as if in response to their desperation, a voice boomed throughout the command center. "We cannot stop it." Walker turned sharply, recognizing the voice. It was Drekor, the leader of the Deathworlder fleet. His holographic image appeared before them, flickering with static, but his expression was clear. "The void cannot be controlled," Drekor said, his tone grave. "You have opened a door to a force that is beyond the comprehension of any living being. You cannot close it. You cannot stop it. You can only endure." Walker's heart sank. The Deathworlders had known the truth all along, but they hadn't told Earth. They hadn't warned them of the dangers the void posed. And now, Earth was trapped in its grip, unable to escape. Drekor's image flickered again, and he seemed to hesitate before continuing. "But there is hope. The void may consume Earth, yes, but it may also offer you something new, something beyond your understanding. There is a chance for you to survive if you embrace the unknown." Walker's mind raced as the words sank in. The void was a force of destruction, but it was also something more. It was a force that could reshape reality itself, offering new possibilities, new powers. The question now was whether Earth would accept its fate or resist it, knowing that doing so might doom them all. The lights in the command center flickered one final time, and then the room fell into complete darkness. And in that darkness, a decision had to be made. Would Earth embrace the void, allowing it to reshape their world? Or would they fight it, knowing that doing so could lead to their destruction? The fate of the planet hung in the balance.